Hello and welcome to the InForm Football Podcast. We are recording this on the 21st. It should be going out on the Sunday, whenever that is. I am Mark. I'm here with Harry.
What up, everyone?
And we're going to be talking all things football. Shall we start by talking about quite a contentious subject, I would imagine? Because I imagine the Players' Union would have something to say about this. Should players be punished for costing a manager's job?
Hands down. I mean, well, I guess you always get that iffy bit where they can be blamed for costing the manager's job, but it could just be that they're terrible. But
yeah, I mean, to put it in context, today, at the time of recording, Swansea have just sacked Paul Clement. It's one of these things. I mean, Ronald Koeman was the one that I originally wanted to discuss, in the fact that the Everton players are constantly saying in interviews now that the new manager coming in, Allardyce, is being a breath of fresh air, and they feel like they've got more freedom to play. And that's always the thing where I just think, well, why weren't they saying that about their old manager?
I guess so. It's like Leicester last season as well, where the players miraculously started playing like they did the season beforehand, after they had sacked Diddy Ding Diddy Dong.
Yeah, Ranieri.
I always forget the name.
Yeah, you spot on though. The players, when Ranieri was sacked, Leicester weren't doing well. The next match, they beat Liverpool 3-1. They went on to stay up. This season, they weren't doing very well. They sacked Shakespeare, brought in Puel. They won their first match. They went on an unbeaten run after that.
But again, I've been... Oh, sorry about that.
That's fine.
But again, I've been thinking about this all day, and I'm not even joking when I think to say that, but another thing we discussed in the last podcast, which, for those of you that are interested, it's unavailable no more, but we won't talk about that now. We did discuss about Everton spending loads of money on these bunch of players that now harvest their squad.
Yeah.
And we said from the get-go that this won't last. Money will just inflate their egos, and they'll think they're the best and play like the worst. And then Ranieri, Koeman's job won't last long.
Yeah.
We said that, and it actually happened. But I see the link between players not necessarily not playing for a manager and getting them sacked is that their egos are too high from transfer fees. Like for instance, Lukaku. They paid 76 million for him. Do you think if he played bad for about 3 games, Mourinho rested him and played someone else, someone like Rashford who was scoring more goals, if they were, he wouldn't be happy about that because his transfer fee. He would think, look, I'm worth 76 million. This teenager has never been purchased, and you're playing him over me.
Yeah.
He's going to get his friends in the squad to rebel against him.
Yeah. And I mean, I was talking about the Everton players in their interviews. One of those players is Ashley Williams, who arguably, I mean, he was okay, I thought, at Swansea, but I think Swansea was his ceiling. And he's gone to Everton for, was it £10 million last year? And he's just not performed for them. But he's now given interviews in the media saying, basically implying that the manager had to go, a new one had to come in, almost implying that the players wanted that to happen. And now that the new guy's in Allardyce, they're finding their feet again, and it's more fun to play under him. I don't think professional footballers should be allowed to come out and say that we have more fun under the new manager, because it's not really supposed to be fun. You're supposed to enjoy yourself, obviously, but you don't do this for fun. You do this because it's your job.
Yeah, and it's like, I had a similar conversation with my missus yesterday. I don't work because it's fun. I work because I have to earn and provide. Like, it should be the same with football. I get that footballers really are only doing that job because they're doing it because they enjoy it. It's fun. I'm not saying they shouldn't enjoy it or they shouldn't find it fun, but countries where they're going, oh, we didn't play for this manager because he weren't fun. Like, you shouldn't be like this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to work for my boss because I don't like him, you know. Yeah, have fun, but don't have fun at someone else's expense.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we'll talk about Everton a lot. We'll come on to Swansea in just a minute. But
We
Everton was
talked
the
about
one.
Everton too much in the last one, so yeah.
Yeah, I think I think that's the reason I want to focus on Everton is because we did discuss it in the last podcast. As Harry said, the last podcast is currently unavailable. We might make it available again in the future if people ask for it. But at this moment in time, this is sort of a reboot. So we're not. I mean, we'll reference it, but we won't really discuss it that much. But in that one, we talked a lot about how Koeman's neck was on the line, and that's exactly what ended up happening. The players weren't performing, but no one was pointing the finger at the players, they were pointing the finger at the manager. And one bad result after another, eventually the manager goes. But that's kind of why I want to talk about should players be punished, because you look at Everton as a very good example. They must have spent a lot of money to get rid of Koeman. Considering he was on only the second season, I think he signed a 3 or 4 year deal when he joined from Southampton. They would have had to have paid him a lot of compensation to sack him. Should the players foot some of that bill? Like, should the chairman call them into a meeting and say, we've had to sack the manager because you're not performing properly, it's cost us X million pounds, we're going to fine you all a week's wages and that's going to cover the compensation?
Well, I guess it gets into that a grey territory where there's reasons for and there's reasons against. Obviously, there's reasons for because a club don't want to be paying for players' mistakes for players' bias in a way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you've got to look at it from the point of view that maybe not every player rebelled against his rule. But if that's the case, yeah, you give a unit punishment, which kind of helps stamp out odd people in the team that want to start this sort of stuff. But you know, it's one of them areas where you can make a lot of arguments for, a lot of arguments against, but neither of which are truly fully justified.
Yeah, I get that. I'll explain a little bit more my reasons for. It's not just about the financial side, it's also the fact that, as I say, players, it's almost like they go on strike and they decide they don't want to play for this manager anymore, I'm going to stop performing. The day the manager's sacked and a new one's brought in, suddenly they want to play for the club again. And, I mean, you could argue that maybe they just didn't like the manager, fair enough. But then, isn't that kind of what conversation channels are for? Like, you can go to your chairman, or maybe not directly to the chairman, but somebody ahead of the manager and just say, things aren't really working out here, rather than just going on strike and costing someone their job. That's why I think there should be a fine, because it's very easy at the moment for clubs just to get rid of managers because the players decide they don't want to play for them anymore. Whereas if the players knew that there was a possibility of a fine for costing their manager their job, it might make them less willing to go on strike. It might also make them more willing to actually do their job properly.
Yeah, I would. One thing I would say is that it's not necessarily the players' fault for a manager underperforming when a team doesn't want to play for him. Like, one half of me says that part of a manager's job is to control a team, control personalities, and do that well. That's all part of management, because you've got to manage people.
Yes.
And I think if you foul in that, you're going to foul in football hands down. That's the first thing you need to do as a football manager, especially in this day and age. But I think someone who managers need to kind of be more like is Ferguson, because he didn't care if you thought you were the biggest player in the world. If you played badly, he would bring you back behind in the changing rooms, and he would give you dryer treatment.
That is very true.
Like, and look how Man United play, because they were too scared to disappoint him. It's not about. I guess it gets the case like managers become too friendly with their players nowadays, and that sounds bad. Not me saying they shouldn't be so friendly with them, but you've got to think about it. In actual professional career, do you expect your manager to be your best friend, or do you expect them to be your manager? If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean that's the test that I always do. I know it's not exactly easy to do this when you're talking about football, but I always compare it to, if you're in an office, how would you interact with your manager? Because I guarantee you wouldn't go out and put an interview out saying you don't like your manager. You wouldn't go on strike in order to get your manager fired. You wouldn't just decide that you're not going to do your job properly for whatever reason.
Exactly.
So I mean that's the basis of my argument is footballers have got to start being treated like professional people doing a job rather than just footballers.
Yeah, and I mean it just I I don't know what much else to say on the subject. Like it is the players shouldn't be like this. To fair enough to the manager, yeah, the players shouldn't be like this. They shouldn't be these personalities that go out and want to cost people their jobs because it's just wrong. But at the same time, on the same hand, you need a manager who can control these personalities, or someone who at least can turn around and go, "Oh, you want to be like that? Well, you're not going to play for this team no more. Bye bye."
Yeah, no, that's normally the catalyst. The manager will fall out with the player and drop them, and the player, either the player themselves or they'll get some teammates alongside them. They'll go on strike, or they'll complain to their agent, or they'll go straight to the chairman. And I mean, you look at Chelsea a couple of years ago with Mourinho. There was a rumour that some Chelsea players went to Abramovich and said he's got to go. And if that's true, no one's come out and said whether it's true or not. But if it is true, then how mad is football now that players can just go over a manager's head like that?
Because usually you get these chairmen that are way above players, like financially and stature wise, like they're way above these players. Like for instance, Sir Alan Sugar, when he was an owner in football, like you can't say that any of them players on the pitch had more money or notoriety than Sir Alan Sugar. Like it's not possible.
Yeah.
Like so they weren't on the same level as to just walk up to him and tell him this. Like, but now players are getting so much money and are worth so much and get so much from sponsorship deals and everything else that they are on the level of the owners almost.
Yeah.
And that they can do this and walk up to him and be like, "Get rid of him, or I'm leaving." And if he leaves, that again, that's a financial. That's almost like financial blackmail. They've got that on the owners because the owners don't want to lose a player who's making up, say, like 30% of a team's shirt sales.
Yeah, it is. It's player power. It's getting out of control.
Exactly. It's like if Pogba and Lukaku teamed up. They went to the Glaciers and went, "Yeah, we don't like Mourinho." Do you think the Glaciers are going to turn around and think, no, we'll just get rid of Pogba and Lukaku? No, they don't matter.
Yeah, I know. They'll get rid of Mourinho.
Yeah, exactly. Because Pogba and Lukaku sell more.
We'll come back to Pogba and Lukaku, in fact, in just a second. In the meantime, Swansea. They got rid of Paul Clement today. Do you think that was the right decision?
Well, Swansea were underperforming, and you know, whenever a team underperforms, you have got to think about the manager. You have got to think about his future in the team. But yeah, I get what we've been saying about these players underperforming for managers and all that. But I don't know with sackings. My personal belief is give it till Christmas or past Christmas, like give it to the new year, which they have, and they are in a bad position. So I know I'm probably be hated for it, but from a standpoint of if you're underperforming and can't control a team, then yes, it was the right decision.
I'll try and throw some stats. Paul Clement, this is the guy who was assistant manager at Chelsea when they did the League and Cup double under Ancelotti. He then went with Ancelotti to Real Madrid and won La Liga there. He then went to Bayern Munich with Ancelotti and won the Bundesliga. I don't think he's a bad coach. I think actually the problem at Swansea was the owners didn't back him. They got rid of Sigurdsson during the summer. They sold him to Everton. They took the whole summer to sort that out. So by the time the new season started, Clement had lost his best attacking player with no chance to replace him. And the only real ins that they've had that you could say were noteworthy were Renato Sanchez, who was totally unproven on the European level, never mind in the Premier League, and Wilfried Boney, who really has been.
Yeah. Well, again, with them answers, I'm going to say I can compare that to, say, someone like Billy Bean, who we will be talking about later, but not right now.
Yeah.
Billy Bean was the general manager of a baseball team in America called the Oakland Athletics many years ago, and they were the poorest team in the league. While the Yankees were spending 120 million on players a month or a week, something like that, the Oakland A's were only paying 30 million, and he had to build a team with that sort of budget. And this is what I say about Swansea as well. Like, he managed to build a team that could reach the playoffs, get into World Series, all but they never won it. They never won it, but they still managed to get in the postseason, which Oakland Athletics could never do before. And he did that smartly. Like, he didn't just rush in and buy these big names or try and keep these big names like Sigerson, who would have had inflated egos and want more money. He goes, all right, you want to leave? You can leave. I don't care. I'm not going to waste time trying to negotiate with you. I'm going to look at other options. Other options are going to cost me half the price, if that. And so I get like two of them. I could probably even get some more that I could flip on later if they start complaining, you know?
Yeah.
Managers should realise early when a battle's a lost cause and think, well, all right, that's the lost cause. I need to shift and try something else. Try go for someone else. He obviously ain't going to re-sign, and I ain't going to listen to him if he's going to be unreasonable.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think that's the stance that... I mean, I'm looking at Swansea's transfers here at the moment, the ones in front of me. So, departures, you've got Gylfi Sigurdsson, Fernando Llorente, Jack Cork, Befetimbi Gomi, Mo Barrow, Jefferson Montero, Borja Baston, Jordi Amat, and one of their goalkeepers retired as well, Gerhard Tremmel. So there's a lot of attacking players there. There's Llorente's gone, Sigurdsson's gone, Gomi's gone, Barrow's gone. And who did they bring in? Tammy Abraham and Wilfried Boney. Now, I like Tammy Abraham. As a Newcastle fan, I'm gutted that we missed out on him. But their only two attacking inputs were Abraham and Boney. I like Abraham. I think Boney's past it. Even at 28, he's past it. They also brought in Klukas from Hull, relegated, arguably not a great signing. He's done well, but I don't think he has the experience to keep Swansea up. Roque Mesa, he's 28, you know, age isn't exactly on his side. Again, he's done okay for them, but okay isn't really enough when you're in a relegation fight. So I that really stinks of the owners just haven't backed him. Like, even bringing in Sanchez, they spent a lot of money to bring him on loan, but they just seem to have put all their eggs in one basket and thought, well, Sanchez can solve our problems. And, I mean, he's really, really been disappointing this season.
Yeah. Fair enough to them. As I would have said, would have been a smart gamble. Like, initially when I saw the transfer, I would have thought it would have been a smart gamble because a young player that's got all the hype around him, he could be something untapped that they could get a great season out of. Yeah, but I guess it just didn't work out, which, you know, is going to be, it's going to happen with young players especially.
I would argue the only reason they got Abraham and Sanchez in the first place was because Paul Clement used his contacts at Chelsea and Bayern Munich. And they trust him to develop their players, so they've been willing to let them go out on loan. January rolls around and they haven't got a new manager. There's no way they're going to be able to bring anyone in of a big name signing that could potentially get them out of trouble.
Well, I guess it can be blamed on the board as well, because the board, to a point, can't just be a board that tell you when you can't have money. They should tell you when you can't spend more money. Like for instance, a board should be a board that is good involved with football and knows what they're doing. Like, that's why teams that have boards, fans that do not care about football, do not think about football, don't generally work as well or look as good, because they just think about the business side. There is more to football than just the business side.
Yeah.
Like, what the board need to do in that situation is turn around and go, not go, we're not giving you no more money, or this. They need to go early on. Hold on, are you sure about that person? Because that isn't right. Or they shouldn't just out and out go, no, you're not signing. They should actually be involved and talk with the managers about this just as much as the managers involved. Because obviously it's their job as well to make this team rise. It's their job to help build the team with the manager. The manager can't do it on his own. He needs input from the board.
Yeah, it really, especially when if you're someone like Paul Clement, you know who you want. You're a really good coach. You've got your eye on certain players in the Premier League and also in Europe. I imagine he went to his owners and said, I want this player, I want this player, and I want this player. And they've probably turned around and said, either we're not giving you the money for it, or we need to get rid of Sigurdsson first, and he'll pay for all the players that you want. I'm trying to remember exactly when Sigurdsson left.
I cannot remember for the life of me.
But it was very, very late in the window. Was it deadline day or was it slightly before that? But
this is again another option when I say you should be try and negotiate with a player so much so that you're blocking out other prospects around you that could be half the price of him.
Yeah.
It's done you should early on. Obviously not just accept it early on and be like, yeah, bye. They should negotiate, and when they get to a point, say 2 weeks into a negotiation, because what we forget as football fans, these negotiations go on for weeks before we hear about them, most probably.
Yeah.
And so what clubs should do in that sense is negotiate for them 2 weeks, and then just be like, okay, obviously we're not on the winning side here, so you're going, but we're not going to confirm you going until we've found these potential prospects around Europe, around the world, or even within their own country that could cost half the price and do just as much damage as he can.
Yeah, I think the worst case scenario really was Swansea should have gambled, and if it hadn't have paid off, they'd have ended up with 3 extra attacking players plus Gylfi Sigurdsson, which really isn't a bad place to be in. As it turns out, they went with the other option, which was to hold on to Sigurdsson. They were trying to get more money out of Everton, to be fair. In the end, they got 45 million quid for Sigurdsson from Everton, and then they didn't have enough time to spend it.
What was the original offer before the 45 million? Do you know?
30, I think, was the opening offer. Then it went to 35, then 40, and then finally they agreed on 45.
See, at 35 and 40, even at 30, you can turn around and be like, for instance, Chelsea's youngster who was playing in the side the other day against who was it? Against Bournemouth.
Yeah.
He played fantastically, and he came from League Two side Exeter. Just about that, there's plenty of these players in non-league and lower leagues, or even if you look to the Swedish and Norwegian and Danish leagues, these players that are extremely undervalued and can play just as well as these other players in top leagues in Europe. They should have taken that 30 million and been like, okay, well, we're going to spend 3 million on this random Norwegian player who is fucking tearing up his league, because Norwegian and Danish teams aren't going to turn around and be like, no, we want 40 million. They're going to turn around and be like, oh, fucking hell, 10 million's an amazing offer. Yeah, sure, we'll take that.
Yeah. I think the whole Sigurdsson deal was disheartening from the start, because you could tell that Swansea originally didn't want to sell. They tried to play hardball, but it's a bit like we were saying with player power. Sigurdsson obviously went to his agent and said, I want to move, do the deal. And at that point, Swansea are being held hostage. They have to agree on something. So they agree to Sigurdsson, we'll sell you, but it has to be on our terms. And then they're just trying to bleed as much money out of Everton as possible. So I can understand why they've kept asking for more money. It's the fact that it took the whole summer, and they started well before the transfer window opened, and they continued it until the transfer window was just about to shut. And there was no time to get any reinforcements in, which is not the manager's fault, because the manager, I imagine, wanted to keep his player, and now they've sacked him because of something that was out of his control in the first place. I think that's a bit of a joke, to be honest.
Yeah, I do understand that, and that is in a way that is sad that has to happen like that. But again, this is another point where the board and the manager should have both been aware how close the window was, and should have been aware, like, how fast it was approaching. Because, like, when having a transfer window like that, that's things you need to be in mind. You need to know when you are, how long you've got till it closes, how long you've got to negotiate with this player, that team, this team, so you can give you ample time to make these deals. And in a way, part and parcel of being a manager is giving yourself the time and making the time to do these deals, which, to be honest, I didn't see none of them doing. Fair if he didn't want to get rid of him, but if you don't want to get rid of him, at least make some time to look at other options, like I've said.
Well, that for me, it lies with the board. It's nothing to do with the manager. That's the board's fault. Whoever's in charge of negotiations at Swansea has let the team down there.
Yeah. Well, that's your opinion.
Well, I'd see no other way of looking at it. You look at the players they've sold. Sigurdsson, Llorente. There's no way that Clement would have gone to his board and said, I want to sell Sigurdsson and I want to sell Llorente. Especially after Sigurdsson left, he would have been saying keep Llorente at all costs. But
yeah,
at that point, again, it's the player's gone to his agent and said, I want to move to Spurs, do the deal. And the club being held to ransom. The board have caved too early for me. They should have kept one of them at least. And I think as soon as Sigurdsson left, Llorente should have just been told you're going nowhere. But I mean, was it 8 million, 9 million, something like that they got for Llorente? That's not bad money for a 32-year-old. But Sigurdsson, they really should have played hardball with.
Yeah, Sigurdsson, I do agree with playing hardball with. But again, like I said, 40 million is a great sum to get. If you're going to get 45 million or 40 million, whatever it was, for a player, the end of the window, the board and the manager combined, even the fans should be expected, like, obviously we ain't going to get to spend that till January.
Well, I'll tell you what, 45 million is a good amount of money. They're probably going to lose double that if they get relegated. So for me, they could lose the 45 and not selling Sigurdsson, but they can make it back in staying in the Premier League.
Well, looking at the league table now, there's only what, 6 points. 6 points between 20th and 12th.
Yep.
Like, a few good signings at, like, I don't know, with that 45 million, 3-4 good signings, probably 2 of them first team quality, could rescue a team like this and get them. Well, there's 6 points to really. They need to lift them out of the relegation zone now, and at least 1 point a game. At least 1 point a game from there. Like, you know, from there on, I see if they make the right signings in January. I think Sigurdsson's deal was really bad until January, because that money ain't going to get spent till January. And if they can spend it right in January, which I guess I can cave in on saying it's the manager's fault. The board should have kept him till January to spend that money, see what he would do with it.
Yeah.
You know, then we can judge the board and the team and the manager and whatever after that. Because then if you're spending 45 million, which is enough to save a relegated threatened team, and it does nothing, then you deserve to go.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they brought Clement in to keep them up last season, and he did just that. He had no transfer window in which to do any deals. He worked with the squad he had, and he managed to keep them up. And the board have probably used that against him this season and said, well, you know, you had no chance to change your squad last season and you did the job, so why haven't you this season? But I think actually the argument I would make is...
he lost his best players.
Yeah, he lost his best players, but also he wasn't given a chance to replace them.
Exactly, and I do understand that, and I do kind of agree with that he should have at least been given until January to see what sort of opening transfers he would make, and if the board turned around and went, hold on, these opening transfers you made are a bit dodgy, then get rid of him, you know.
Yeah, because for all we know, January could roll round, and Clement could pick up the phone, and he'll get in touch with Chelsea, and he'll just say, I notice you're not playing Batshuayi much this season, do you mind if I take him on loan? Or he could phone up Bayern Munich and say, hey, that fringe player that's doing really, really well in everyone's opinion, but you're not really giving him much game time. Do you mind if I take him for this season? And
Exactly.
you know, he could call up, he could get on the phone. 1st of January, he could get on the phone, and he can immediately be put through to whoever's in charge of transfers at Chelsea, Real Madrid, and Bayern Munich. Why would you sack someone who has that pulling power? It's ridiculous.
Like, you don't get many managers you get managers that were players in these big clubs, but they don't really have connections much anymore. But for someone who's been an assistant manager and hopped around these clubs, would have these connections, is a very valuable player. I could imagine him going to some team like, I don't know, Crystal Palace or even Watford. Like, and with the money they've got available, they're not masses and masses of money, but it's still pretty good for Premier League. He could build an underdog team that could do very well. But and all right, with Crystal Palace, that's arguable because obviously Crystal Palace board is a bit funny as well when it comes to managers. But Watford, Watford, I would say would be an ideal team for him to hop at. If the Watford manager goes to Everton, which has been rumoured, but you know it's not looking likely. But if the Watford manager goes to Everton, he should at least try and get the Watford job, because I honestly feel Watford would be the ideal team for him to apply his skills at and grow as a manager.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, since you've mentioned it, let's talk about Watford and let's talk about Burnley, shall we? At the time of recording this, Watford have had a little bit of a slump. They currently sit in 10th. But I'll say that. They're 3 points behind Everton, they're 4 points behind Leicester.
10th in the Premier League. Arguably the best league in the world. That's
I know.
Pretty good.
It's the fact we can now just talk about Watford as having a slump when they sit 10th. I mean, that's good. It's good that we can say that. They've had a lot of injuries and suspensions as well, so they actually have a reason behind their poor form. But Burnley are 6th. They are 1 point behind Arsenal. They are 2 points behind Liverpool. They're only 5 points behind Chelsea, who sit 3rd. They're having a fantastic season.
I'm looking at it now, and even I can't believe that Burnley are sitting 6th. Like, you expect the battle of the Claret and Blues to be the other way around. You expect West Ham to be 6th, even though it pains me to say that, and Burnley to be 15th. Like,
yeah,
the fortunes of the Claret and Blues has changed.
I mean, even Burnley, they lost Michael Keane during the summer.
This turns back to the subject me and you were discussing the other day. Sean Dyche being an underrated manager, going under the radar, and because he's gone under the radar, he's been able to sit there and do his job.
He's incredibly underrated. When he was at Watford, I think the only reason Watford really sacked him is because the new owners came in and they wanted to put Zola in.
Exactly.
But Watford, he did a good job, and then after that he went to Burnley. He got them promoted.
He's got a legacy there now. You cannot argue that the man will not be remembered at Burnley very fondly.
Yeah, he was honest about it as well. I think that's what's so great about Sean Dyche, is he's honest. When they got promoted the first time around, he said it was too early, and he said it was going to be a difficult season, and he basically said to the supporters, we're not going to stay up this season. And because he was honest about it from the start, I reckon that's why he kept his job, because the owners were fully on board with what he was doing. They knew they all got promoted too early. They could enjoy their season in the Premier League, and then next season when they're back in the Championship, that's when the job begins.
And they've got Premier League money as well.
Yeah, and they won the league. They got relegated back to the Championship. First season down, they won the league. They've come back up and they've stayed up.
When they got promoted originally, weren't it through the playoffs? So
yeah, they've won the playoffs.
For a team to go from winning the playoffs to them winning the league is showing you the improvement he's done.
I'm trying to remember who they came up with.
Because I remember they had Danny Ings in their squad originally, and I love Danny Ings.
Yeah.
And this must be like another thing with Dyche. Like, he found Danny Ings when no one knew him. He took him to the Premier League, and then everyone for that season, at least that season, everyone thought him and Charlie Austin were the two greatest things in the Premier League at the time. And then these big clubs take them for big money and ruin them. I mean, look, Charlie Austin's in Southampton now after... Where was he before? Before Southampton?
QPR.
Yeah. Well, alright, so he didn't obviously go to a massive team, but again, he went to another team that was quote-unquote bigger than the one he was at before, at the time.
Whereas if ever
And
proof was needed that no player is bigger than a club, as you say, Charlie Austin, he went to QPR, they got relegated the season he was there, which is why he ended up at Southampton. Danny Ings, free transfer to Liverpool, barely played for them.
yeah, I mean, look, I'm not gonna lie. I did think that Danny Ings would be a great signing for Liverpool, but he would have been. But Liverpool, one, didn't give him chances, and two, when they did give him chances, wouldn't give him like a game how he plays. Like, this is one thing I've actually been thinking about, and I've been thinking about this a lot. And this is, well, if I was a manager, this would set me apart from other managers. This is my philosophy that when a big star for a little club, so say like a Benteke for Aston Villa, when
Yep.
a massive star for a little club who's performed amazingly, if not better than most other players in massive clubs in his league, goes to a big club, because of their size and stature, are not willing to bend to this nobody's playing style. They're not willing to change their whole system for a nobody. And that's why generally these underdog legends foul at massive clubs, because they just look at them and be like, he's come from Aston Villa. Why should we change our whole system from him coming from Aston Villa?
Yep.
When we can bring in someone from Real Madrid and change our whole system around them. Like, and that's when then, say like when he went back to Crystal Palace, then when a big player from a big team goes to a little team, that little team is more than willing. In fact, they're over the moon to change their entire system to fit him. And that's why you always get the best out of players in smaller teams, because they are willing to change everything for them.
Yeah, I could list loads of players. No disrespect to any of these clubs, but Ricky Lambert, Southampton, left to go to Liverpool, played twice or something, and then ended up
I loved
at
him
Cardiff.
at Southampton. I loved him at Southampton, and after that, he just disappeared off the map.
Wilfried Zaha left Palace to go to Man United, was back within a year. Wilfried Boney left Swansea to go to City, ended up at Stoke on loan, and now he's back at Swansea on loan. As you said, Benteke left Villa. There's so many times where that's happened, where players had one good season, arguably, and they end up getting this big money move, and then they just never really perform once they've moved, and it ruins their career.
I don't put that on the players. I don't put that, like, quite a lot of the time I will put that on the players, like someone like Sterling. They're arrogant. From what I've seen from him, he's an arrogant player.
Is. Yeah.
And he wants to everything fit him. Then you get someone like Benteke who gets a big money move. He's not an arrogant player. He's a player that does play well, and he has the right to be like, well, I'm a great player. I deserve this sort of move. But then for the team to turn around and be like, well, you don't deserve for us to change our system for you, it should be a red light.
I would argue that a little bit. I'd say sometimes it's not the player's fault. Like, I've never been in a situation where someone has said, do you want your dream job? Like, it's here if you say yes. I've never been in that situation, so I probably would do what these players do, in that they get a phone call from their agent.
We'd all have our morals and say we wouldn't.
Yeah, but I always think, when it comes to football, like Ricky Lambert is a really good example. He wasn't getting any younger. He was 32. He'd had a really good season with Southampton. They'd qualified for Europe. And he gets a phone call saying, Brendan Rodgers has been on the phone. He wants you at Liverpool. Surely there should be something in the back of his head saying, is this really the right move? He's a boyhood Liverpool fan. He's always wanted to play for Liverpool. So I can understand why he would take it. Because he wants to play for his boyhood club. And hindsight is a very powerful thing. So he's probably sitting there now regretting making that decision. But there must have been something. Like, him and his agent must have sat down and said, you're not going to be a first team player at Liverpool. You might as well stay at Southampton. You can play in Europe. You can still play for the England team. And you can do everything you wanted to do at Liverpool, but you'd be doing it at Southampton instead.
Yeah. I mean, look, I would turn around and I'd argue that differently. I would say that in fair dues to him, he was 32 at the time, I think, and it would have been a chance for him to sit down and think, well, I ain't getting any better, like you said. So I want to go out with a bang. I want to go out playing for the team I've grown up watching.
But that's not what ended up happening. He didn't go out with a bang. He went out with a whimper.
Not necessarily like a bang as in playing bang. Like, he wants to go out with a high for himself, which is, it doesn't have to be playing time. It could just be representing the shirt that you followed since you were a kid. Like, for instance, if I was a League Two or a Vanarama national player, and then I was say 35 years old, I was banging it in for, let's say, Bromley FC. I was banging it in for them. I was a striker. I was scoring like 30 goals a season, and all that stuff. And then Millwall turned around and said, we'll give you a job here, but you won't play much, blah, blah, blah. I would jump at the chance to say that, just to say I've represented the club I've supported since I was little, and I've managed to go out in front of all the fans that I was once a part of, you know?
I would say no.
Really?
If I was like, I'm a boyhood Newcastle fan, and I used to sit and dream about playing at St James's. And let's say I got into football now. You know, I'm 24. I'm not exactly getting younger as it is. But let's say I was playing in League One, top of my game, doing really well, and I got a call saying Newcastle want you. I would actually have the conversation where I would say, am I actually going to get game time there? Because if I'm not, then what's the point? And you look at, I mean, I'm looking at Lambert's stats now. At Southampton, he scored 106 goals in 207 appearances. That's over a goal every 2 games, which for any striker, that's the record you want. After that, he spent a season at Liverpool and a season at West Brom. He played 45 times and only scored 3 goals. That is not going out with a bang, is it? I would say he will never admit it, because I know he'll say that I played for my boyhood club and I achieved my dreams, but I'm sure one day he'll sit down and he'll just think, why did I leave? Why did I go to Liverpool?
Yeah. I mean, I guess everyone would think that at some point, but then there's some people that would sit down and think, again, like I've said, that, you know what, I'm just happy I got a chance to play for them.
But he was giving interviews saying that he couldn't understand why he wasn't getting picked. That's what's ridiculous. It's the fact that he seemed to have this delusion that he would be a first choice player for Liverpool when they had, Sturridge, Sterling, Coutinho. Why did he think he was going to get picked to play every game?
Yeah, precisely.
And I mean, it was a good deal, a really good deal, as it turned out, for Southampton, because they didn't miss him. He obviously did the whole players bigger than the club thing. Southampton said, okay, you can go. They got 4 million for him, which for a 32-year-old striker who's only had 1 or 2 good seasons in the Premier League
as well. This is before the massive inflation of players as well.
That's a really good deal. They got Graziano Pella. They never looked back. They also signed Sadio Mane in the same transfer window.
Exactly, and look where he is now.
Yeah. So, I think that the whole thing from Lambert's side was a mistake. I think from Southampton's side, they've had a plan in place for years where if a player decides they want to leave, they've got 5 or 6 names on a list that they could bring in at a moment's notice to replace them.
This is why I love Southampton, because they are that Moneyball side. They're like, well, you want to leave? Leave. You've got 5 players that can replace you for half the price. And that's why I go back to Swansea. Swansea should be more like that. But, I'm not going to talk more about Swansea because we've talked about it for ages. But that's why I love Southampton, because Southampton are a team that, I believe the year they sold Mane, they sold like all 11 of their starting players, bar 1 actually, and they rebuilt the entire squad and got Europa League.
Yeah, they got to a League Cup final last year.
Exactly. Like, admittedly, this season won't be the greatest for turning around and saying, look, they're an amazing team building a new squad, like, because they're sitting 12th. But every team has a hiccup season. Hopefully, it isn't just more than this, but constantly coming from a team that have been in the spells of the lower footballing league and the championship to now be in this team that is a giant one in the Premier League, not to the stature of Arsenal, Chelsea, United, City, all them, but to at least be a giant in the terms of top half of the table, kind of people would genuinely be scared to play them because they know they're a strong side kind of team.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I admire them, because they've done it smartly. They haven't given in to these massive players that want massive deals. They've turned around, well, you want that? Well, see ya. We've got someone else who will take less.
And to go back to Burnley and to Watford, actually, because Watford have sold a few good players in recent times. I mean, Burnley started the season with Sam Vokes up front. I like Sam Vokes. I think he does a really good job for Wales. I think he's actually done okay for Burnley, but he's not a big money player. But
Yeah.
they had a really good start to the season. You know, they beat Chelsea away, first game of the season.
I mean, sometimes you need these players that aren't like massive money signers, that are half decent players that come in for. Like, we don't know the ins and outs. We don't know the backstage. He could have come in because of his personality. He could have been like a
Yeah.
good personality for the squad, a good leader.
That's
like,
kind of my
we don't
point.
know.
Burnley are proving that. I mean, you look at Man United. They didn't need a new striker at the start of this season. They got Martial, they got Rashford. At the time, they didn't have
With that,
Ibrahimovic.
I feel like they just caved into Pogba and bought him just because of Pogba.
Yeah, it really feels like that. I think that's why they gave Lingard a new deal as well. But we'll come back to that in a second. But the fact that Burnley are proving that you don't need a big hitman up front. Like, they got promoted with Danny Ings as their main striker. Danny Ings said, "I'm leaving on a free transfer to Liverpool." I imagine Dyche drove him to Anfield and said, "See you later, son. We're going to move on without you." They're now doing really, really well. Danny Ings is warming the bench. He's probably never going to play for Liverpool again. He got a little cameo at the weekend when they were already 4-0 up. That's it. That's all he's reduced to now at Liverpool.
It's got to that point now where I've literally forgot about Danny Ings to the point I didn't even realise he still played for Liverpool.
I forgot about him. It's only because
that insane.
It's only because the transfer rumours are starting up now, and me being a Newcastle fan, I'm looking to see what's going to save our season. We've been linked with him, and I told my dad about it, and I told my brother about it, and we pretty much all said at the same time, "Don't want him."
See, this is where I go back to my point earlier. A name from a massive team going to a smaller club sometimes works out when other people expect it not to, because they're willing to change the system for him. Like Balotelli, for instance. Balotelli, I loved him as a personality and as a player briefly, but he was one that his career had just gone to a point where it was like he's fouled them at senior levels in most big teams. So he's gone to Nice. And because Nice are a smaller club in France, not a small club, but a smaller one than, say, like PSG or Milan.
Yeah.
Monaco, sorry, not Milan. Because he's gone to Nice, they have changed their system to fit him. And look at him, he had a fantastic season with Nice.
Same with Ben Arfa.
And that put his name back on the map. Like, no one cared about Benteke until he went to Nice, put his name back on the map, and then people started talking about him again.
That's the thing. Like, at the moment, in terms of league status, Newcastle are a small team. But we're looking at that rumour, Danny Ings to Newcastle, and my whole family sort of said, "We're better than that. We're better than him." Like, I don't want to say this too much because, let's be honest, Liverpool are a huge team. They're a European giant. They've won the League Cup They won the European Cup, so many times. Until Man United in recent times, they were the most successful team in England. But I look at Newcastle, and I look at the size of the stadium, and I look at the fan base, and I just think Newcastle is a much bigger team than Liverpool. We should be looking a lot higher than getting loan players from Liverpool who failed at Liverpool.
Yeah.
Like, Sturridge is another player we've been linked with. I wouldn't mind Sturridge because, in my opinion, he's a good England striker. And I look at Ings and just think, he left for the money, let's be honest. Burnley offered him a new deal, that's why they went to a tribunal. Liverpool offered him more, that's why he went to Liverpool. Didn't play, got injured, came back, didn't play, got injured, came back, got injured. And I don't want him. Why would anyone? Like, even Championship managers must be looking at Danny Ings and thinking, is he really worth the risk? It's such a shame, because he, as you say, he was such a good player. Him and Austin at Burnley were unbeatable, and both of them now have sort of stagnated.
Yeah,
Burnley, meanwhile, are going to be qualifying for Europe this season if they carry on like this.
Going back to my other point, I'm just looking at his stat now. And Balotelli, the most goals he's ever scored in a season was for Milan in the 2013-14 season, and he scored 14 goals in 30 league appearances.
That's good.
Last season for Nice, when everyone had given up hope with him.
Yeah.
When everyone had just thought, you know what, he's gone, he's done. Like, his career's over. In 23 appearances, he scored 15 goals.
Yeah.
And then this year, even though the season is not over yet, he's had 13 appearances and he scored 10.
That's why I love Nice. I mean, Balotelli was the first example, but they also did it with Ben Arthur. Newcastle released him. His career was over, essentially. You know, when he went on loan to Hull, and they sent him back and said he's not good enough. He went to Nice and set the world on fire. Okay, he made the wrong decision because he chose PSG. Because he went for, I'm assuming he chased the money on that one, and he's not exactly doing well there at PSG. But then they've signed loads of attacking players since he joined, so it's not necessarily his fault. But you're damn right when you say about Nice. That's what English clubs should be doing. They should be looking to see who are the bargains in Europe, bringing them in.
This is when I say that big clubs think it's too much of a gamble to change their system to benefit a player they've just brought in more from an underdog team who set the world alight there, and they're too afraid to change the system. But then you shouldn't have been taking the gamble to buy the player in the first place if you're not willing to follow through and take the gamble to play him how he plays. If you're only going to take half the gamble, you're going to foul.
Okay, with that in mind, Manchester United. Let's discuss Manchester United. Now, I've put here on my notes, are they a team in chaos? At the moment, I think yes, they are a team in chaos. As I say, we're recording this on the Thursday. Last night, they
financially and businessly in chaos.
All over the place, I think they're in chaos. Last night, they got knocked out of the League Cup via a last-minute goal, which, if you're Mourinho, and if you're a Man United fan, that's embarrassing. As good as Bristol City are, let's not forget, as good as Bristol City are, they are a really, really good team at the moment. They're in form. They're try and remember exactly where they are in the Championship at the moment. They were right up near the top. They had a really good start to the season. They were without Tammy Abraham, once again proving that no player makes a team. They had a really good start, and I'm just trying to find their lineup for the match last night, because, correct me if I'm wrong, they had Ibrahimovic start up front. They had Martial, I think, started. I believe Rashford also started. Pogba started in midfield. They lost. It's a joke, really. I don't particularly like Man United, but I know when they should win and when they shouldn't. Here we go. They had Pogba, Rashford, Ibrahimovic and Martial all starting. They also brought Lukaku on just after the hour. How come they lost?
Well, I know. Like, I mean, you look at fucking. Then you can look at the non-league teams last season in the FA. I guess you could say, it was a fairy tale that they beat these Championship sides and they got to play these Premier League sides, and one of them did beat a Premier League side. But then you also got to think about, well, why did they? Were the teams playing poor? Was it just they didn't care?
Yeah. To try and be impartial a little bit, this is the fourth Premier League team Bristol City have beaten in the competition this season. But it's the Man United squad that I really want to look at. We said it just now about
squad,
did they sign Lukaku for goal scoring reasons, or did they sign Lukaku because he's Pogba's mate? Also, I'm looking at Jesse Lingard. I used to love Jesse Lingard. When I used to play Football Manager and I used to play FIFA, he was always the first player I'd try and sign. But when he made his debut for Man United, it was Louis van Gaal's first home game, I think, against Swansea. He made his debut, and he ended up with a knee injury and got subbed off. And everyone was talking about this brilliant young player that had come through into the Man United team. And they still describe him as a brilliant young player. He's 25. He's older than me. That's not young. At 25... he should be looking to either make a name for himself at Man United, or he should have moved on and made a name for himself somewhere else. Instead, he's a 25-year-old fringe player who I think has only been given a new contract because he was Pogba's best mate at the academy.
True.
And, I mean, you look at the new Predator advert with Pogba. It's all about Pogba. Like, the boot only appears in the last 3 seconds of the advert. Up till then, it's all about Pogba. And you watch Man United play at Old Trafford, and Pogba's emoji comes up on the advertising boards around the edge of the pitch. And you said earlier on in this podcast about Ferguson. I genuinely believe if Ferguson was still Man United manager, Pogba would still be at Juventus. Ibrahimovic would be retired. I think Rashford would probably still be in the academy. I think Lingard would still be in the academy, if not sold. And I think Lukaku would still be playing for Chelsea.
Yeah, and it's just another thing that take it back to. Ferguson had this zero tolerance policy in the first place. Like,
Yeah.
I believe the original story with Pogba leaving Man United was that he left because his agent was demanding higher fees and wages and stuff, and
Yeah, essentially. Ferguson didn't like his attitude. And anyone watching this now on YouTube, look at the image on the screen of the Man United lineup. Look at Pogba. If a player under Ferguson walked into the dressing room with a hairstyle like that, he'd have a boot kicked at his face and he'd be sent home. Like, Mourinho has no control over his players. The fight after the Manchester derby proves that he has no control over his players. He's a manager that doesn't seem to be that happy with where he is. He seems to be stuck at Manchester now. I'm not entirely convinced that Man United was the career move he wanted to make. It's just a case of they wanted a manager, he was unemployed, they came calling, the deal was done. I don't think really he wanted to become Manchester United manager when he did. I think he wanted it to be on his terms, but because he got sacked by Chelsea, he didn't really have a choice. But you can just tell the way he is in press conferences, he has no control really over what's happening. And when you watch them out on the pitch, he's fallen out with Mkhitaryan. Why? Probably because Mkhitaryan is now fighting against him. I'm looking at the squad photo there, and I can say there's 3 or 4 players on that list where what the hell are they doing at Man United? Ashley Young, why is he still there? You know, Juan Mata, why is he still there? Matic, why did Matic go to Man United apart from he likes Mourinho? Blind, could they not bring anyone else into play? The only players they brought in the summer really were Lindelof, who's a flop, and Lukaku, who was unnecessary. It's funny, really, what's going on there. You know, when Ferguson left and Moyes came in, they said he had no control, and he lost his job after 7 months. Louis van Gaal came in, he had too much control, arguably. And yeah, it's a strange one. It is a strange one. It's just I mean, I'll run through some things. We've lost Harry at the moment, so I'll run through some things with you really quickly. I mean, I've put it as a team in chaos. There's been some rumours this week that the board want answers as to what's been going on in the dressing room. You look at some of the performances this season. They lost to Huddersfield. You know, the fight after the Manchester derby, the way in which they lost the derby, 2 assists from Lukaku to the Man City players, not very good. You look at Lukaku's record. You know, he came in, he scored, was it 8 games in a row I think he scored? He broke the record that Van Nistelrooy set, and then he went on a massive goal drought. And I think it was the Newcastle game, much to my pain, where he ended that goal drought. And you look since, he's not really done much. Ibrahimovic, supposedly the big signing of the summer was the re-signing of Ibrahimovic, which is a real slap in the face if you're Lukaku. You know, the Pogba signing, I don't think that was anything to do with Mourinho. I think that was the Man United board seeing the commercial prospects. So they brought him in. And then, as I say, they give Lingard the new deal, again above Mourinho's head because he's Pogba's mate and they want to keep Pogba happy. They then bring Lukaku in despite his antics during the summer. You know, he's been fined by the Los Angeles Police Department for his partying whilst he was out there. Ferguson would never have stood for that. He would have actually pulled out of signing the player because of something like that. But yeah, it's I'm an outsider looking in, so I'm saying how I see it, and I have a slight bias because I really don't like Man United. I think the way they go about things at times is wrong. But yeah, I don't get what's happening with Man United at the moment. They don't seem like a big dominating team anymore. You know, Jesse Lingard came out and said if it wasn't for Man City playing well this season, Man United would win the league. But I've also read stories that actually compare the stats, and that's not the case at all. At the time of recording this, Man United sits second, 3 points ahead of Chelsea, who they did lose to. don't forget. They are 11 points behind Man City. 11 points. We're not even halfway through the Premier League season yet, and they're 11 points behind. They lost to City last week. That's the championship over, as far as I'm concerned, for Man United. They're not going to win the league now. In terms of the cups, one of the cups that they won last year, the League Cup, that they were really proud of, and they were really publicising the fact that they won a domestic cup. They're out of that now because the team that they fielded wasn't strong enough. Pogba, Rashford, Ibrahimovic, Martial, they lost to a championship team. FA Cup, they could well do well in the FA Cup. Champions League, they weren't convincing. They got through, but they weren't convincing. They could well go out in the first knockout round. It's really not looking good for Man United this season. I'm trying not to enjoy it too much because my own team are doing bad, but at the same time, the big, bold Manchester United of old seem to have died now. They've been replaced by this team that are very boring to watch, very boring to support, I imagine. And it's a worry for any Man United fans out there. Alright, so let's leave it about Man United. Harry's back with us again.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about our final topic of this week's podcast, which is Barnsley. Now, I don't know if anyone has heard of the Moneyball principle. Harry mentioned it before. It's invented by Billy Bean of the Oakland A's.
It wasn't actually invented by him. It was invented in
That's a good point. It was pioneered by him.
80 or 1890, but he was the first one to bring it to mainstream.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Anyone who's seen the film Moneyball with Brad Pitt, you'll know what we're talking about.
Brad Pitt.
The main idea behind Bean's Moneyball principle was finding players that sort of fell through the cracks in terms of stats, and then bringing them into his team. So, for example, they had an underarm pitcher rather than an overarm. They had batters. That's what they're called, isn't it? I don't know much about baseball. Yeah.
Like, say, for instance, they brought in a pitcher who couldn't throw because he had a dodgy elbow.
Yeah.
He couldn't throw, but he could get on base. So the way baseball works is you have 4 bases, homes included, and you need to get all around them to score a point.
Yeah.
He was one of them players that could get round to all the bases and then score, but he couldn't throw, so you just brought him in just to get on bases.
Gotcha. The reason we're talking about Billy Bean is because he is part of a consortium including a load of Chinese businessmen who have just bought Barnsley.
Random team to buy, to be fair.
It sort of came out of nowhere as well. I wasn't even aware of the fact they were up for sale.
Exactly. It's like the Portsmouth deal with Michael Eisner. Like, we saw that coming for months, but this one literally just came out of relevance in like the past 2-3 days.
Yeah, it's the first I heard about it was this morning, pretty much, when they said that they'd been sold, and I didn't even know they were up for sale. But there you go. That's really interesting, though, because does that mean that the Moneyball principle is actually going to be used in England, or because it's a Chinese consortium as well, are they going to take the policy of just buy players for loads of money?
Well, see, when we say that, Barnsley would definitely not be the first team to use the Moneyball principle. Brentford have been the #1 flagship team to do it in this country, because the owner of Brentford, he was a professional gambler. He used similar principles called soccernomics to win at gambling with football, and then he then put that into actually running the club, and he did that with Midtjylland. He owns Midtjylland. He did that with Midtjylland, and he won the league with them.
Yeah.
Then he bought Brentford, his boyhood club, and he got him promoted from League One. And first season in Championship, he got the playoffs. So obviously it works, but it's still yet to be seen what the quote-unquote grandmaster of the Moneyball principle can do with this team.
Yeah, I think it's a good benchmark for other clubs, particularly in the Championship, as this season I'd say more money's been spent in the Championship this season than any other season in the history of the Championship. That's the sort of level. There's Premier League level spending going on. If you look at teams like Middlesbrough and Wolves, they've both broken the Championship transfer record in recent months. Wolves particularly, they've signed players like Ruben Neves and Carrillo, is it? Their winger. They've spent a lot of money. Middlesbrough have bought Brett Assombalonga. There's a lot of money in the top half of the Championship, shall we say. And
So
Leeds are selling players for £15 million as well.
that feels almost like we need a team like this to come along, just like Brentford, to start changing the game. Really,
Yeah,
I mean, I'd have loved Billy Bean to take over Millwall and do it with us, because we sell a lot of players, but we don't necessarily sell them for their value.
yeah. I think the aim of Barnsley here is not necessarily to win the league themselves, but to prove to the big spenders that it's possible to do well, having not spent any money. That's the goal here.
Again, we're just spitballing here because like we haven't seen nothing yet. Yes, Billy Bean's in charge, and I'm really hoping that, well, Billy Bean is one of the people in charge, and I'm really hoping that means he's pushing the Chinese investors into a positive direction.
Yeah,
As we've seen from Chinese and Arab investors before, like when the money comes in, it just keeps flowing in. Like Aston Villa. Aston Villa have been pumped full of money since I think it's Singaporean businessman took over, or Indonesian.
yeah. I can't remember exactly.
But they haven't done well. Man City, obviously, they had Sheikh Mansour take over, and he got them up and up and up. So hopefully, with the Chinese businessmen, they have quite a fair bit of money. But with Billy Bean there being the hand of sense, hopefully they can then use that money to identify these like next Messi's and next Ronaldo and next Marcelo's in like Eastern Europe or Africa or even in this country, and just buy them and develop them.
Yeah, I'd imagine it would be the Chinese investors are there with the money just in case. But I imagine Bean's been brought in to help the scouting side of it. So he'll still be running it as a director and maybe even as chairman, but he could also head up the scouting department and make sure that, you know, the lesser known good players are the ones being picked up by Barnsley and not just being left out there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It'd be really interesting to see how it plays out. I'm personally a big fan of the Moneyball principle. I always try and, I mean, Football Manager is as a Football Manager player, I know it's not the best forum to go to for football realism at times, but I think it's a really good experiment on there whenever I play to try and use the Moneyball principle. It's something that, when UEFA first announced financial fair play, I actually started looking at Moneyball as, well, this is how football clubs are going to operate from here on out. But actually, not a lot's changed. So it'd be interesting to see if Barnsley do it and it works. Would that encourage the FA to be stricter on financial fair play? Would that make UEFA and maybe even FIFA more observant to the fact that it is possible to achieve on a limited budget?
Yeah.
And we go back to teams like Burnley. They've spent nothing really since they got promoted. They spent 15 million on Chris Wood this summer, which was their transfer record, I believe, and that's their only real noteworthy transfer. They got Robbie Brady last year for less than 15 million, which I think is, considering how well he's played this season, is a bit of a steal. I know he's injured now, but before that he was playing really, really well. There are lots of clubs out there proving that it is possible to do it on a tight budget. It's just nice to see that one of the people that pioneered the principle is now actually operating in England. Perhaps more people will start paying attention.
Definitely, and you know, it could only be a positive in some ways, and hopefully it is only a positive, and it kind of changes the face of football, especially in the Championship, where half the teams don't have the money that the top half do.
Yeah. It's one of these things. I know the FA can't bring in any rules necessarily to level the playing field slightly, but it would be nice if teams themselves could start competing on limited budgets, sort of level the playing field that way.
See, I agree and I disagree with that, because I see it from the point of view of say, like a supporter of a big team in Championship. I wouldn't want to have them restrictions because that's just the MLS rules. That is literally the MLS rules. And yeah, fair dues. The MLS have operated a fairly successful and growing league, but that's the top division of a country, and that's in another continent. Like that isn't like European football generally works.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's been really difficult for the FA to get involved and make rules. So it's really down to the clubs to sort of prove that money isn't always the necessity.
Well, yeah, no. Hopefully they do. But do you think this Billy Bean, if he does end up doing this principle, will kind of have other teams do that nudge to do the same?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think one area that this is not a good thing in respect to Billy Bean is the fact that he is now only allowed to work within Barnsley. Like if he'd not have been involved in this takeover, he could have been hired as a consultant to lots of different sports teams, which I think he was around about the time the Moneyball book was released. He worked as a consultant for several teams to help them with sort of their budget management and things like that. Now he's actually involved with Barnsley. That means he can't operate with any other club in England. So I think in that respect it's a bit of a shame. It's a bit of a loss to the rest of us. But for Barnsley it's a massive, massive advantage. They're already doing well this season.
Yeah, definitely.
They're playing some good football. So if they get the right recruitments in January with the help of the new board, then we could be seeing Barnsley in the Premier League next season.
Well, bit of
Stranger things have happened.
a tad of a push, but
Stranger things have happened. If Huddersfield and Brighton can get promoted, then there's no reason why teams like Barnsley can't.
I guess so. I would have more instead of a random club like. But I guess he's gone to Barnsley because they're usually the most financially poor in the Championship. They are probably the poorest team in the Championship, and I would have seen more sense going to. Because the way I'm looking at it, it's just a random team to take over. No disrespect to Barnsley fans, but from my point of view, it's such a random team to take over. And I would have expected someone like I don't know, like Preston, because they have obviously the history of. They have their history, and or Wolves because of their history, and Nottingham Forest and all that. The team that had a transfer embargo for about a year. But Barnsley, fucking random.
It's interesting that you say. It's interesting that you say that Barnsley being a small team. I don't think Barnsley are a small team. All due respect, I'm looking at the Championship table, and I would say in terms of stadium size and fan base and things like that, I think the smallest teams in the Championship are Burton Albion, definitely. I think Fulham and QPR, they've got a lot of history, but their stadiums are relatively small, plus there's a lot of competition in that area.
Their stadiums are old and disgusting.
I think Millwall are a small club in the Championship, because you think how long they've spent, how many of the last few years they've spent in League One compared to the Championship. In terms of history, they're right up there, but in terms of recent times... I'd say in recent times they're a small club.
But we're still like bottom half Championship. That's all we've ever been, apart from when we had Teddy Sheringham and all that. But that's another story for another day. But
I mean, Barnsley, they used to be in the top division, if I recall. They've got a good squad. They got a very well built squad. It's quite surprising actually to see how good a squad Barnsley have got. Some of the players they've got in particular are very impressive. I watched them play against Leeds earlier this season, and they really gave them a game. I mean, this is Leeds. This is Leeds that have spent an absolute butt ton of money and are right up the top of the league, challenging for promotion. And they're being held by a team like Barnsley for a considerable amount of time. And I do look at the Championship table, and I think it's one of the most accurate tables I've seen in terms of where clubs are. You got a couple of surprises, like Birmingham are right down the bottom. I know they've been clinging on for the last few seasons, but it's always a surprise to see a team like Birmingham at the bottom. Then you got teams like Wolves and Cardiff at the top, which is pretty much exactly where I'd expect them to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, looking at the table, Barnsley are 20th on 21 points. I imagine the owners wanted to sell, and they got in touch with prospective consortiums, and whoever wanted to take charge would have gone around and looked for investors and advisors and things like that. I imagine that's how Billy Bean got involved. These Chinese investors got in touch with him and said, we're looking to take over this football club. Can you help us? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I imagine he's been brought in as I said before, pretty much as a consultant. He might have some shares, he might be active on the board, but I imagine his role is mostly there to advise rather than to actually run the club.
I say that he could be a godsend, but then I remember he wasn't the one who did all the work at Oakland Athletics either. His assistant GM was the maths graduate from Yale.
Yeah.
And he's the one who showed him this idea and pioneered this idea to him. And he was the only one that listened to him. So if we're talking about anyone that would more or less know more to do with this than Billy Bean, would be him. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But I remember Jonah Hill played him in the movie, and he was like a massive part of Billy Bean rising and become, and I'm really hoping that he's involved somehow in this as well to kind of help and be that second pair of hands.
I'm just looking at some of the stats involved here. It's actually tying up quite nicely to what we were saying before. This consortium, they've bought 80% in Barnsley. Unfortunately, the previous owner was diagnosed with terminal cancer, so that explains why the club has been sold.
Yes.
The consortium that have bought Barnsley also own Nice. So there's that little tie-in. And the other thing that I was looking at, it's only the third takeover in Barnsley's 130-year history.
Only the third?
Yeah.
So, only... Wow.
That means four different owners have owned Barnsley in 130 years. That gives you an idea as to how rare it is, first of all, that Barnsley would be sold, how lucky they are to have found the right owner at the right time, and also what a good deal this is for everybody, really.
Wow. I never knew that about Barnsley. Four owners.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting. Definitely interesting. I'm just reading on a little bit more to see where Bean got involved with all of this. It looks like pretty much, as I said, Bean's been brought in to use his Moneyball tactics to use computer analysis to find those unrecognised players and bring them in and develop them. And I think that's one of the things that the Moneyball film didn't necessarily show, but the resale value as well is right up there, as well as sort of bringing in players and the team improving as a result of that. There's also the buy-sell principle that's becoming common in football these days too.
Yeah. No, that is totally true. And, I hope that Billy Beans, I'm not sure how much of a knowledge he has with football, and I'm hoping that he takes it a whole lot differently to how
it does say this isn't his first venture into football, so he has worked within the sport before.
And this is good.
It's all good news.
Next up, all he needs is to join Berylson at Millwall and help us win the Champions League with the cheapest squad in history.
No, that is something that can only happen in a film, unfortunately.
I'm just dreaming it now.
But yeah, that pretty much wraps up this podcast. I think we've ended it quite nicely.
Yeah, talking about Millwall winning Champions League very nicely.
Yes. Well, we started off by talking about how players should be fined for costing managers jobs, and we've ended by saying well done Barnsley and good luck to you.
Well, nice way to end the podcast. But honestly, I'll definitely be following Barnsley close now. especially after this whole Billy Bean saga. And I'm definitely going to see what they do in January as well, because seeing them in January would be exciting.
Yeah, I've sort of been keeping half an eye on Barnsley for a while. Last season, when Newcastle were playing against them in the Championship, we loaned Adam Armstrong to them as well. So I was always watching them for that. And they did quite well, considering. I think they had a bit of a scrap in the second half of the season, but they stayed up. And they had a really good start to this season. As I say, the 20th now, so it has tailed off a little bit. But there's no reason why, with the right signings, it can't kick on and they could end up finishing in the playoffs. You never know.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, it has been nice to get back on the podcast. It has been nice to talk about football for an hour once again. It was horrible to lose internet connection, and I hope you all tune back in.
Yes. We'll work on the technical issues. This is the second one we've done. It's gone a lot better than the first one, I would say, so that's positive.
Yeah, definitely. Apart from we haven't slagged off Everton for the entire live stream, but...
Well, I mean, it's constructive criticism, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you know. Yeah.
If they want to listen to two 20-somethings tell them how to run their football club, that's entirely up to them.
But they should listen.
Yeah, well, I think the whole world could learn from that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's been nice doing this podcast again, and I hope to do one again soon.
Yep. I can't promise that we'll do them weekly, but we will definitely do them more regularly.
We'll definitely try to, because we both get a load of ideas, but it's just about putting them onto the microphone.
That's exactly it. Right, so let's wrap up, shall we? It's been a good podcast. We talked about lots of stuff. If there's anything that you guys want us to talk about in the next podcast, just leave some comments down below. You will be seeing the InForm football logo very, very soon if you follow my particular YouTube channel. Don't know if Harry wants to plug his channel as well while we're here.
My channel's in the hiccup phases. I haven't got nothing yet. I don't want to plug anything yet, so no.
Well, I can announce that InForm Football are the new sponsors of Hatfield Town going into the new Football Manager season. So as soon as that season kicks off, you will be seeing this logo a lot more regularly.
Yay!
And as we say, we will try and get the next podcast out to you soon. And that's about it, really. So from me, it's goodbye. And I assume Harry wants to say bye as well.
Have a good night, all of you.
Alright. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.